ship is now resting exactly where it landed 2 hours ago. And so far...
Before the warning, before the silence, before a visitor from another world stood at the top of a ramp and placed the weight of human survival on human shoulders, there were men in an office with a red pen, deciding how much of this film you were allowed to experience.
The day the Earth stood still was supposed to hit harder than it did. The ending you know, the one that stayed with people for 75 years, that was not the ending Edmund North wrote. The resurrection scene you remember wasn't fully what Robert Wise intended either. By the time this is over, you'll understand not just what this film became, but what it was built to be. And the gap makes the film stranger and more honest, and in some ways, more unsettling than it already is. The story of what was changed, specifically why, by whom, and what they were actually afraid of, is the part that doesn't get talked about much. The people most concerned about what this movie was saying weren't on another planet. They were on Wilshire Boulevard. And once you know the 3 specific places they reached into this film and altered it, you can't watch the final scene the same way again. There's a subscribe button on screen if you want more of this kind of thing. Now, it starts here. Beat 1. The Human Before the Mask.
About 5 months. Your months. You must have come.
The carpenter who came in peace. He didn't come here angry. He arrived over Washington on a clear morning with no weapons drawn, no ultimatum prepared. He came with a message, in the most straightforward sense of the word, in peace. The name wasn't chosen casually. Screenwriter Edmund North and director Robert Wise built this character with deliberate intention. Klaatu was derived from a Mayan word meaning star, not a conqueror, not a threat. A star that had traveled a long distance to find us and say something we needed to hear. And then they gave him an alias. Moving through Washington in disguise, trying to understand the species he'd come to warn, he introduced himself as Mr. Carpenter. That was not a throwaway detail. North and Wise put that name there deliberately. A quiet, unmistakable reference to the carpenter from Nazareth, a figure who arrived with a message of peace, moved among ordinary people, and was eventually killed for what he represented. This wasn't a subtle wink for attentive viewers. It was the load-bearing structure of the entire story. In the boarding house, he was simply a man. Thoughtful, curious, watching a boy named Bobby navigate a world of paper routes and weekend matinees, while adults argued about whether the thing in their midst should be trusted or shot. He asked questions the way you do when you're genuinely trying to understand something, not to judge it, but to find what's worth saving in it. Professor Barnhart was the best version of what Klaatu was looking for. That name was widely read as a fusion of brain and heart, the idea being that human survival required both intellect and genuine compassion. Before Sam Jaffe was cast, the filmmakers considered Claude Rains, Charles Laughton, and Spencer Tracy, 3 completely different actors, each representing something similar. A human being capable of hearing the message. The patient, hopeful version of Klaatu, the one who still believed the message might land, is the one we need to hold on to. Because what happened next didn't just complicate that character, it complicated the people who made him.
Believe me, Tom, I know what I'm talking about.
He's a menace to the whole world. It's our duty to turn him in.
But he isn't a man.
Beat 2. The Wound. The men with the red pens. The speech was supposed to go further. When Klaatu climbs the ramp of the saucer for the last time and delivers his warning, what you heard in 1951 was not what Edmund North originally wrote. The original script contained a direct reference to divine intervention as the only thing that could save humanity if they failed to choose peace. It was a harder line, the kind that looks you in the eye without blinking. The MPAA found it inappropriate. Not inflammatory, not dangerous in any physical sense, the Motion Picture Association concluded that connecting human survival to divine accountability was something audiences were not permitted to hear. The line was changed. In the version that reached theaters, Klaatu places the fate of humanity entirely on human shoulders, a powerful message in its own right, but a different one that removes the dimension of judgment from outside the human frame altogether. That wasn't the only place they intervened. Gort retrieves Klaatu's body, and there he is revived. Briefly, not permanently, in what the film frames as its most spiritually weighted scene. A man killed for his message, brought back to deliver one final word.
The MPAA found this too suggestive of the supernatural. Their solution was a single inserted line in which Klaatu explicitly states that the power to permanently restore life is reserved to the Almighty Spirit. Gort's technology could accomplish what it did, but only up to a point.
Robert Wise and Edmund North had to add that disclaimer. Consider what that means. They had built a deliberate Christ allegory around a character named for a carpenter who arrives with a message of peace, is killed, and is brought back. The Christ parallel was the point. It was the architecture of the story. And the censors, upon reviewing the scene that completed that allegory, required the filmmakers to explain, out loud, in dialogue, that this was not actually a miracle. There was a third alteration. Klaatu's original line was direct. You talk of destruction, but you do it. The MPAA required it softened to, you talk of peace, but you do not act on it. The difference matters. The original makes human beings the active agents of their own destruction. The revision keeps the critique at the level of aspiration versus behavior. One accuses, the other merely disappoints. Before these three interventions, this film was building towards something specific. Afterward, it was something else. Beat 3. The Choice.
It's only a few blocks to Barnard's.
Worried about Gort. I'm afraid of...
The film they decided to make anyway. They could have made a very different film. Wise and North were operating inside a Hollywood system with real constraints and real gatekeepers. The MPAA had genuine authority. Without their certificate of approval, distribution became nearly impossible. And Wise and North walked straight at them anyway. Producer Darryl F. Zanuck wanted something more overtly anti-communist, a Cold War narrative pointing at a specific enemy, fitting the political framework of the moment. Wise and North made a film about human aggression in general, a film where the threat to Earth came from Earth itself, from the refusal of any nation to subordinate its weapons to the larger interest of survival. That choice is what put them in the room with the censors. They built the allegory deliberately. They chose the name Carpenter deliberately. They scored the film with Bernard Herrmann's experimental music, 2 theremins, sounds that had never appeared in a major Hollywood score before. That score became one of the most influential in Hollywood history. Herrmann would go on to work with Hitchcock and Scorsese. Wise himself had edited Citizen Kane for Orson Welles, had absorbed that form follows meaning, that how you tell something shapes what it says. That lesson is visible throughout The Day the Earth Stood Still, in the pacing, in the deliberate restraint of a film that could have sensational, and chose instead to be quiet and precise. These were real choices, made against real pressure. They crossed from entertainment into allegory, knowing the censors would come. And the censors did come, specifically, surgically, in 3 documented places.
Northwoods? Would he crawl into the sewers of some great city?
Beat 4. The Price. What the Red Pen Cost. The film that exists is a great film, a genuine masterwork of early science fiction that has lasted 3/4 of a century. The version audiences saw in 1951 was extraordinary. But the version they didn't see is gone. The original dialogue for Klaatu's final speech, the lines before the MPAA required the removal of the divine intervention reference, was never released. The script pages exist. The MPAA correspondence documenting the forced revision exists. But the filmed scene, if it was ever shot with the original words, did not survive in any releasable form. There's something almost elegant in how the MPAA's intervention worked against itself. They required the clarification because the resurrection was too suggestive of the divine. But it was suggestive of the divine because that was precisely the point. The same structure the censors found problematic was the structure that gave the film its moral weight. And by requiring a disclaimer that neutralized it, they ensured the allegory would remain visible but incomplete, like a sentence that ends one word too soon. The original accusation. "You talk of destruction, but you do it," became a disappointment. What Klaatu observed in humanity was allowed to be acknowledged only at a distance that didn't quite sting.
It's worth noting that Lock Martin wore the Gort costume for no longer than 30 minutes at a stretch, because the foam rubber suit was too heavy and too hot to sustain. The iconic slow movements of that robot, imitated for 7 decades, exist because a man inside was suffering and couldn't move freely. Sometimes constraint produces something lasting and strange. What remained was a film that was almost what it was meant to be, a warning that almost said what it was sent to say. The original title, Farewell to the Master, was changed to something more immediate. The edges were rounded off, layer by layer, before the film ever left the studio. Beat 5, The Verdict.
I bet that iron guy's strong. I bet he can knock down.
Klaatu Barada Nikto.
Here's where it gets genuinely complicated, because there are 2 defensible positions, and I don't think either one is entirely wrong. The case for the censors. Hollywood in 1951 was not operating in a vacuum. The MPAA's production code existed partly to protect the industry from legislative interference. There were people in Congress looking for material that could justify government oversight of the film business. A major studio picture building an explicit Christ allegory around an extraterrestrial visitor, complete with resurrection, was not a small provocation. The censors may have been trying to protect the filmmakers from something considerably worse than a few altered lines. The case against. Wise and North knew exactly what they were doing. The allegory wasn't accidental. It was the deliberate architecture of the story, built choice by choice from the character's name outward. The MPAA didn't trim the edges. They reached into the theological core and altered the thing that gave the allegory its completion. The 3 changes they required weren't marginal. The lines they removed or softened or added were the load-bearing walls. The film was almost a complete version of itself. A figure who arrived in peace, was killed for his message, was briefly revived, and was almost allowed to say what he came to say. Instead, we have the version where the warning is still powerful and the allegory is still visible. But the closing lines were changed, the direct accusation was softened, and a single inserted sentence made sure no one confused advanced alien technology with an actual miracle. The people who made this film knew what they were doing at every level. Bernard Herrmann scoring it with sounds Hollywood had never heard before. Robert Wise understanding that form and meaning are inseparable. Edmund North writing Mr. Carpenter into a science fiction script as a considered act of storytelling. These weren't people working by accident. They understood that what a story is made of shapes what it says. The MPAA understood that too. That's why they changed it. The tribunal is open. Was that censorship a reasonable protection of the film and the people who made it? Or was it the most precise possible demonstration of the exact human failure the film was built to warn us about? Drop your verdict in the comments. I read them all. A visitor came in peace, was killed for his message, was briefly revived, and delivered a warning. And the people responsible for deciding what warnings audiences were permitted to hear rewrote the ending before it could reach them. What you watched in 1951, or on a streaming service recently, is a great film. It's also a film that was opened up and operated on before it left the studio. The original script pages exist. The MPAA correspondence exists. The intentions of the filmmakers are documented and verified. What doesn't exist, what was never released and may not have survived at all, is the version of the final speech that North actually wrote. The one where the full weight of the warning was still there. They kept that from you. Whether they were right to, that's yours to decide.